The English people are loyal to Rome. There's never been any doubt on who their spiritual leaders are. The Pope has reigned supreme for generations, as the entire European continent falls under one banner of Roman Catholicism. The institutions and monasteries set in place have become powerful and resonate with the population, but all of that is about to change. Henry VIII wants a new wife, and has broken away from Rome to create his own church, the Church of England. To ensure full support for their king, Parliament created the Act of Supremacy. Henry ordered that all public figures and clergymen swear to the oath of supremacy, stating that they are no longer Roman Catholics, but recognize Henry VIII as head of the Church of England. Those who refuse would be tried for treason and executed. Hello and welcome to the channel. I'm of course the Knight of History, and this is part number 4 of the Henry VIII story and the Reformation story. Today we will actually discuss the English Reformation and the change of religion for an entire country. Then more importantly, if you're feeling charitable, please go find the link down below in the description to donate to a charity called Mercy Ships Hospitals on ships, helping people who have absolutely nothing. So anything will help. Please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and also a big thank you to all of you who have donated so far. You are an absolute lifesaver. Now, let's get into it. There was a group of Carthusian monks who were still loyal to the Pope and refused to swear the oath of supremacy. As a punishment, they were dragged through the streets, hung, drawn and quartered, meaning that they're hanged to death, their bowels torn out and then chopped up into 4 parts. Truly horrifically violent acts took place. The abbot's arm was brought back to the abbey and nailed to the door. Monks' heads were placed on spikes above London Bridge. The most famous figure who refused Henry was his great friend, Sir Thomas More, who was one of the most celebrated writers and thinkers of the age. More even became the Lord Chancellor, like the Prime Minister, after the downfall of Thomas Wolsey. But it only lasted 3 years before stepping down in 1532. He was a truly devoted Roman Catholic and could not accept Henry's marriage to Anne Boleyn. But in 1534, he refused to swear to the oath of supremacy. So Henry had him dragged out of his home, locked in a dark, damp prison cell for 17 months. His old friend, Henry VIII, would go and visit him and plead with him to change his mind. But he said in his conscience it would not allow him to do so. More therefore was tried for treason and executed in 1535. On the scaffold, More stated, "I die the king's good servant, but God comes first." With Cardinal Wolsey dead, Thomas More executed, Henry had started to run out of friends and he needed a new chief minister. He chose a man whose father had been a blacksmith that then became a merchant and a will merchant, a banker and a lawyer. This man's descendant, Oliver, would eventually go and overthrow the monarchy, but back in Henry's day, the new chief minister was Thomas Cromwell. Now, Cromwell had been a keen reader of Martin Luther, and he pushed for further Protestantism reforms within the church. In particular, he proposed that all of England's wealthy land-owning abbeys and monasteries should be closed and shut down. Monasteries had had 1,000 years of history in providing education, prayer and charity to the people of England. But they were also accused of excessive wealth and corruption. Many of England's 800 monasteries were very wealthy, owning magnificent treasures and around a quarter of the land in England. If they were to be closed, this land and property would be reverted back to the crown, and Henry would gain all the money, and he was always in need of money to fight his wars. So Cromwell's plan was hailed as an absolute masterstroke, and by 1536 the desolation of the monasteries began. The king's men descended on the monasteries, stripping them of their lead roofs, their gold, their silver, their jewels from their altars, and selling their land to local landowners. The inhabitants of the monasteries, the nuns and the monks, were given a small pension and thrown out in the streets. Henry made himself enormously rich, increasing the crown's income to around £90 million in today's money. England's monasteries and abbeys, once so magnificent and the jewel of the nation, were left to crumble. Many of these haunting ruins can still be seen across England even today. For many in England, the destruction of England's monasteries was perhaps a step too far, and in autumn 1536 a group of angry Catholics gathered in Yorkshire. They were led by a young nobleman called Robert Asker. He and his followers occupied the city of York, and they invited the expelled nuns and monks to return to their monasteries and resume their Catholic practices. Asker's followers became known as the Pilgrim of Grace as their numbers began to swell to around 30,000, many of whom were armed, and they planned to march to London. Henry VIII had to send an army north to meet Asker and his rebel army. He promised that if they went home, all would be forgiven. But it's around this point in time where we see Henry VIII becoming increasingly cruel. A year later, when a much smaller rebellion broke out, he took an opportunity of this small rebellion to go and kill 200 of the leaders involved in Asker's rebellion. In Cumberland, 70 villagers were hung from trees in front of their families. Robert Asker was hung in chains from York Castle and left to die a slow, agonizing death. Prior to their dissolution, the monasteries provided basic education for boys, in the surrounding area, of course. To replace this service, wealthy landowners in the area established grammar schools, and in the 16th century, around 300 of these grammar schools sprang up. They mainly focus on the teachings of Latin, art, arithmetic, but most importantly, they began to promote the new faith of Protestantism. They were very harsh in terms of their punishment. The students would be beaten with a birch or rapped over the knuckles with a wooden rod. It was the very start of modern education system in England, and it would take over the country. Many of these schools were named after Henry VIII's son, Edward. But how did Henry VIII eventually get a son? Find out in the next episode. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and find the donation link down below in the description. Thank you so much for watching. The more you know.